What is up, everybody? I'm Van with Hang Free, and today is going to be one of our link theory videos because we're showing you how to splice Predator. This is the 8mm Predator that we just came out with earlier this year. Yes, Samson does have an 11mm. This is no different in terms of construction or materials used to make it. It is just different, one, with the colorway, and two, as the millimeter. This is a great, fantastic rope. It's very, very pliable, very versatile. You can splice it, you can sew it, you can tie it, you can do just about everything. But today's video is how to splice it. I will be showing you with tan just so that the marks that I make are a little bit easier to see. However, before we start, I want to cover two things very, very quickly. Number one, if you hear talking in the background or someone talking to me, that is probably either Wyatt or John, making sure that they have the right camera angle, as we want to show everything in very close detail. That way you guys can see and follow along. So if you hear that, that's what's going on. And number two, while I will be showing you guys how to do this today, make sure to do your own research. We actually do not splice our own eyes. We use another Samson distributor who splices our Predator. They are certified. They have all their certifications for that. We are certified in Amsteel, and we are not technically certified in this, although I do know how to splice it. I just wanted to let you guys know that I would definitely do your own research or purchase it from us pre-done, as again, we have another Samson distributor who does all this Predator splicing for us, and that's basically all they do, and they're very good at it. So again, just wanted to note that. Make sure to do your own research. Again, we are not certified in the double braid class 1 eye splice, which is what Predator is. So make sure that you guys are doing your own research and that you don't use this video as a tutorial. This is just an educational video only for guys that do know how to splice this or want to follow along. Again, this is not a tutorial how-to. This is just showing you guys how we would do it for our own personal selves, as again, we have a Samson distributor who does all of the splicing for the stuff we are selling to you guys. So there's a couple tools you're going to need to begin with. You'll need some tape, some scissors. You don't need 2 pair. We just work all day with scissors. So we cut tape with 1 pair and we cut rope with another. That way they don't get gummed up. You'll need a wire or a splicing wire. We just make ours out of, I believe this is 16 gauge. It's a little bit heavier duty than like an 18 gauge. So you can make a simple wire, forming an eye into it, tying it off on the end. Very cheap. You can kind of home make it. You make it out of a clothes hanger if you like. You need some sort of fid. You can pick one or the other, or you can use both. I kind of like to have both on hand. This is an actual rope splicing fid. I believe it's called a marlin spike. I could be wrong about that. I am wrong about that because this is a marlin spike. So if you have one of these, awesome, you can use it. However, a simple like knitting needle from Walmart, I think 2 of these cost like $3, something like that, very cheap. So some type of fid, and as we go along, we'll show you how to use these. I'll just have an assortment. You don't need all 3. You'll need a marker, and then this is technically the splicing fid. However, you don't need this. I'm going to tell you the measurements that you can make or how long this is, and you can follow along as I go. So now that we have adjusted the cameras to help you guys visualize or see what's going on, we are going to start by making our marks. I'm going to try to make this as easy or as understandable as possible by naming off kind of the marks as we go. This fid is the Samson fid for 8mm, which again is what Predator is. I'm going to measure this out, so if you don't have one of these, you can follow along. The full entire fid length is 6 inches and 3/4, and then the short fid, which will come into play here in a second, is going to be 2.5 inches long. So you'll take, to begin, your fid, and you're going to mark out with your marker 1 fid length right here. You can make these pretty heavy marks. I'll make them heavy just so you can see them, and again, that's why I'm using tan today, to help you guys see the marks that I'm making. From there, your next mark will be how large you want the eye. So I'm not going to go with a real large eye today. I'll go kind of medium size, maybe 5 or 6 inches. You can kind of measure it out to there. That'll be at 6 inches. However, it won't end exactly the length of this eye. If you want a 6-inch eye, go a little bit past maybe 27 or 28. Before I really get farther into this, I did want to point out that I started out with 10 feet of rope. So I'll tell you how much I'm going to use for the eye, and then I'll tell you how much I have at the end, and you guys can kind of do the math to figure out how much you need for what you're trying to make. So here I'm going to go with a 6-inch eye, which is using 12 inches of actual rope. I'll make my second mark there. So you have mark 1, mark 2. From mark 2, you're going to go up 1 short fid, so that's your 2.5 inches, and mark here. That's going to be all of the marks you make before you pull the core out of this rope, and I'll show you how to do that right now. Oh, before doing that, you're going to want to go up 5 fids, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This doesn't have to be super accurate. I actually like to go a little bit past that 5 length or 5 fids mark, and from here you can tie alpine butterfly. I just tie a simple overhand knot, lock that out, and that's going to prevent the core and the sheath from sliding apart, and I'll show you what I mean here in just a second. Before we pull that core out, you're going to make a couple more marks. This is where it gets a little bit harder to see. Making sure wide you got the good camera for them to see here. You're going to want to, from your mark 1, you're going to want to count pairs of strands, but you want to go 8 strands forward or towards the end and mark that pair. So I'll use a fid to point these out. You're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's where you're going to make another mark right there. This one can be kind of thick. Again, go into that. From that mark, which I guess we can call mark 4, you're going to count out every 5 pair of strands. So that's a pair, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll place it technically on the 6th, which is right here. And you just want to mark just those 2 strands. If you get them on a couple other strands, it's not a big deal. You're going to do that 6 times. So that's 1. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mark here. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mark there. 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mark there. That's 4. Mark there. 5. And mark here. That will be your 6th mark and your final mark for the sheath. You can put the marker to the side for now. From here, you're going to want to go back up to mark 2. That's again the mark prior to the short fid mark. Here is where you're going to want to pull the core out. This is one of the harder parts. If you want to bunch that up a little bit just to give yourself a little bit more room, you can take an I believe this is called an aug. You can also use just a regular fid. The goal is to not get between any strands or split any strands of the sheath. So I actually like using this tool. I'll kind of pull that back and get that down in there. If you are not used to splicing, this may be a little bit harder of a part to do for you. I can see that I did split a strand there, so I'll just re-aim and I'll start trying to work that core up and out. So you just want to kind of dig down, get that core and start pulling it up. You can use your thumb, kind of bend that rope backwards. Pull that out. And now you guys probably realize why we have a company that we work with that helps us do this splicing, as this is a little bit more tedious or time consuming than say Amsteel. As you start getting that out, try to work that rope back, and I'm continuously digging down the side and kind of scooping that core up to me. You might get a little bit of marker on your hands. That's why my hand looked like it might be purple. Once you kind of get that, it'll come out pretty effortlessly. I'm going to grab that core. To be completely honest, here's where I personally would bite it and pull it out. I'm going to. Helps a little bit if you can't get a good hold on it with your hands. From there, you want to make sure you're pulling this core away from the end. knot away from this end where your knot is, pulling it away from the tag end or the free end, pulling that core out, pushing that sheath upwards. You're gonna pull it out to here. So now you have your core out. You can take your knotted end. I actually happen to have a little hook right there, and I'm gonna then go ahead and pull this sheath back down, making sure there's no slack in there towards that splice. I can tell just by the leaking of the marker, leaked through the sheath and came down and kind of marked that, so I know that's where my mark is. If you can't see that marker mark, then what you're going to want to do, pull that sheath real tight, take a marker and mark right here, right where that exits. You make that pretty thick just so you don't lose it. From there, you want to re-pull that sheath back out, and the first mark you're going to make is going to be one short fid. We can call this mark 2 for the core. You go one short fid or 2.5 inches. You mark there, and from that mark, mark 2 on the core, you're going to go one long fid and then one short fid. You're going to mark there. Now all of your marking is done. You can take your marker, throw it to the side, and we're all done with that.
How many inches is that?
That will be, it'll be 9.5 inches from mark 2 to mark 3 on your core. And again, that'll be just a short fid, which is 2.5 inches. From there, you're gonna wanna come down to the end of your core, and you're gonna wanna kind of bunch that up a little bit. I'll take a fid, although you could do this with scissors. You open them up and you kind of pick them, or you can do it with the same spike you use to actually pull the core out of the sheath. I just find it easier to use a fid here. You want to go a few inches away from the end. You can go 5 if you'd like. Kind of bunch that up, and you're going to be taking out 6 pairs. You can go 7 if you'd like. That's 1. And you want to slowly work up the rope as you do this to give it a nice taper. 2. 3. 4. There's another one. I'm actually going to go ahead and start trimming these off. A good pair of scissors is always nice to have, although really just about any scissors will work. That end is getting a little bit frayed, which is not the funnest thing in the world to deal with. If you're taking a little bit more time than I am, then it shouldn't fray. Just trying to do it a little bit quickly for video purposes. Push those off the side. I'm gonna go ahead and pick out 2 more strands real quick. Just trim those off. Do one from over here. Alrighty, so then you have a tapered end. If you can make it look a little bit cleaner than that, always preferred, but by no means do you have to. So, alright, so the next part you're going to want to do is do the same thing to the actual rope side of the, or the sheath side of the piece of predator you have. You're going to be starting out on those 6 marks you made here, pulling out those pairs of strands. So you should technically be pulling out, if you have 6 marks, you'll be pulling out 12 strands. You're going to want to pinch underneath what you're trying to pull out, because you want to pull it from this end, not from down here. So you can start by pulling out the strands. It's going to be easier to pull these out as you go up, but again, I'm pulling away from the end. And these ends are taped in, so that's half the reason it's a little bit on the harder side. Pull the adjacent pair there. And I'm gonna trim as I go. That's more for video purposes, so you guys can see what I'm doing. That's the first pair. Put that down, trim real quick. Now you want to move up to your second pair. and pull here. I'll trim at the end. Third pair, making sure you're only grabbing one strand at a time. And that's the third pair there. Going for the fourth. As you can definitely probably see, it is getting much easier as I go up. There's less bulk and less resistance from the rope itself. It's the fourth. You might start losing your dots. You can always kind of give a rough eyeball. Don't tell anybody I told you that. You definitely want to pull the same strands. I actually still can see my marks, so there's the last pair that I'll be pulling out. After you get those out, I'm going to go ahead and give them a good trim, getting them close to that sheath as possible without clipping the sheath. And last one. From there, you can kind of milk it down, give it a little bit of a pull, make sure that sheath is nice and flat. Now you're going to come back to your core, and this is where you're going to make your first splice using the wire. I'm going to go ahead and put this off to the side for just a second. Now you're going to want to somehow make sure that you are staying on the same side where this isn't twisting. But if you've seen any of our other videos, this is very similar to AM steel splicing at this point. You're going to want to kind of bunch up at mark 3 on your core, taking your wire, making sure you're not splitting any individual strands, that you're going into the middle. This is a hollow braid, so you can feed that wire right up the middle, ensuring you don't pop out anywhere. If you do pop that wire out, just pull it back and keep feeding it up. You're going to go to mark 2 on the core, and you're going to pop that out right through the top. From there, you want to take your sheath and you're going to insert the end. I leave the tape on there just to help with this part right here. Feeding it into that wire a little bit. I might have jinxed myself and the tape might actually be messing me up, but dealing with a bunch of fibers is very annoying. Pull that through, and from that point I can take that tape off of there. Tape this one up as if I wasn't going to be splicing it, but alright, so then you're going to want to kind of take that core, fold it back. You don't need a whole lot in that wire, or take that cover and fold it back, and you want to suck that down into the core. Before I get too far away here, I just want to make sure you guys can be able to see this. This was mark 1 on your rope. That's mark technically 4, because you mark 1, 2, 3, and then you came back to the front and made your 4th mark. You will be splicing, and you'll see it here in a second, you'll be splicing to your mark 4 here shortly. So keep pulling that core through, popping out this end. From here, you're going to want to secure this. This is where that tape and scissors kind of come back into play. If you have a really good pair of clamps, you can just clamp that end. That would be preferred. I don't have a pair of clamps that will do it. So I use a little bit of tape and actually one of those fids. Whatever you use to kind of get that sheath or the core out from the sheath, you can use for this part if you don't have a good pair of clamps. I kind of take this, fold it over on itself. As you can see why I left that tape on there to begin with. The kind of, I guess, frayed strands or loose strands are pain to deal with. We're gonna just, this doesn't have to be super pretty. You're just making sure that this can't slip back into that core here in a second. So you may have seen a little bit of a cut there. We had to change one of the camera batteries, but once you get that taped up or clamped down, that just makes sure that this can't go back into that that core. So you can kind of put that to the side. You're going to want to focus your core now. Again, I'm focusing that there's no twist in the rope here. So you're going to go to mark 3 on your core, and you're going to do basically the exact same thing. The one tricky part about this particular aspect is making sure that when you insert this, not only are you not splitting a strand, that you also don't go and jam it down into the core. You're going to want to ride it just across the top of the sheath, that making sure you miss the core and get right over top of it, and you're going to feed that all the way up to that 4th mark as I showed you earlier. So from here, I'll insert the wire here, making sure that I'm not getting into that core. I can kind of use my thumb as a guide and feel that wire across the top of that sheath. If you think you kind of got hung up, just pull it back out and you can kind of re-aim or retry. Kind of tighten up that core a little bit. I think it was a little bit bunched in there, so I just went and gave that a little bit of a pull, just to make sure. Now you feed it all the way up. The resistance on that makes me feel like I might have got the core. I'm going to re-aim one more time just to make sure. You really don't want to get that core, as it can affect the integrity of the strength of the rope, and you may not know it due to not being able to see it. So that time I'm sure I did not get it. I'm going to feed that all the way up. Again, kind of maintaining that, making sure it's not slipping out or pulling back into that sheath. Again, trying to not twist the rope. I'm going to go try to find that 4th mark. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. You can kind of bend that wire. That's why we use a little bit lighter gauge wire. Feeding it all the way up. There's my 1st mark that I made. I'm going to that 4th mark. Trying to not twist it. I'm going to go ahead and pop out at that kind of 4th mark. Kind of use my finger, guide that wire through. This is, in the beginning, was the hardest part for me to learn, just because this kept on wanting to get sucked back into that sheath. That's why I started using the tape. Now this part also is not the funnest. You got to figure out how to get all these small little strands into the wire tip. Try to just bunch it up a little bit. I'll sometimes just kind of pull it through and then make sure all of them are forward, but it's just a little bit of finesse in it. Another little tip you can do: take another piece of tape and just tape that end up just to help get it through that wire. Tape it up here. That'll just help it keep together. Feed my wire back down to that mark. And of course, doing it for video, a little bit harder than if I was just doing it myself and not worrying about if everything's on camera. But you can kind of use that, feed it in there. What I'm actually going to go do is trim that, making sure it doesn't get caught up on that sheath again. Trying to get it as short as possible. Pull that through, and you're going to want to take the tape off at this point. But as you can see, the little things like putting the tape on there did make that a lot easier than the first time. Take that off of there. Maybe get that strand through. I'm going to try it again where we'll see. Get that cord pulled back down in there. There it goes. Over one more little bump. Come on. Kind of just finesse it. There we go. You want to pull that wire straight back out again and get it over that. Give it a good pull. There you go, and your core will pop out. From there, kind of want to pull that through, get that tightened up a little bit. You're going to come back over here to this end. At this point, you're going to untape this, make sure not to let this go. Pull that off, pull that down. So now you should have something that looks fairly similar to this. I'm going to go ahead and give that a pull to try to get this little bunching out. Pull that there. And you can see it started to suck into itself. You want to do the same on this side. Give that a good pull. You can pull them both at the same time. There you go. This is called your crossover point. You want to make sure that's very tight. What I'm going to do before pulling that crossover sleeve back the other way is go ahead and kind of give this a little bit of a taper. You can just cut at an angle. Nice long gradual taper. This is really going to help when you're pulling the slack out of the rope itself. From that point, make sure your crossover point is tight, and then you're going to want to pinch and hold that crossover point, and you're going to pull that sheath or that core back over top, and that'll suck down and disappear into the core. Still holding that crossover point nice and tight, and now you're going to do it the same way the other direction. Holding that crossover point, pulling back towards the eye down this way, making sure you milk all of that slack out of the system. From there, you can lay it down. What you're going to want to do, you're going to bring that marker back that you had earlier. You're going to mark this point here. You can now pull that back out this direction, and you want to cut it off a little bit beneath that mark you just made, making sure that it'll fully disappear back into the rope. From there, you're going to give that same kind of taper you did earlier, bunching it up a little bit, grabbing a few pairs of strands. You can go 7 or 8 strands here. Giving it again a nice taper. I'm going to try to taper this one a little bit better, even though I kind of just frayed that up a little bit, but take your time on this, make sure you're doing it right. Go from there. Pulling out your strands. At that point, I believe I just pulled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 strands total. Go ahead and trim those off. And the last 2. Then you can kind of take your end, do the same thing you just did, give it a nice long kind of gradual taper. Reducing that bulk a little bit. Alrighty, now that you have that, you are ready to basically finish this splice. By doing so, might have to stand up, we might have to change camera angles for this, so let's go ahead and get that set up and we can go from there. Alright, so we're over here because we have a hook on this window, but I'm at the same point I was just a second ago. You're going to take that knot you tied earlier, you want to place that onto some sort of hook. If you're at home, you use a truck hitch, you can use a doorknob, you're really kind of up to you. You can take this, again holding that crossover point, kind of milking that slack out of there. You can kind of watch that rope disappear into there as it milks down. You may have a little bit sticking out, give that a little bit of a pull, and it'll go away. You're going to want to hold your crossover point at this point, making sure that the core itself is milked down so there's no bunching up here. Hold the crossover, pull the core down. How I like to do this is holding the crossover. I'll just kind of start walking it back, making sure this stays tight and that there is no bunching. And you can see I'm kind of pulling that core around as I go. From there, I'll come up to the top where that knot is, and I'll start milking that line back down, keeping constant tension on this and pulling at the same time as I'm working this down. And as you can see, it's kind of disappearing or suck it into the sheath. Give that, you can break it free, kind of wiggle it. That's going to make the next pull much easier. Kind of just making sure it's loose. You can come back up again, still keeping tension on the loop side, pulling any slack out of there. And then you might need to give it a good pop or a pull, and that's starting to work or disappear completely. I'm going to wiggle that free one more time. I'll give it another pull. Pulling that down, and then pull it. And you see there, that would be your first mark. That should be in the V of the eye. So right here. Now I am going to give it one more pull just to make sure that's fully in there. One more good pull, constant tension, get all that slack out of there, and give it one more jam. So now you can see that your Mark 1 is basically completely gone. You might barely be able to see a little bit right there. If you want to give it one more pull just for good measure, you absolutely can. You also can take a piece. I have some pretty beat up or strong hands, so running it with my hand doesn't bother me. But if you want to take a loop or a cord or something and girth hitch it onto here, like so, we got all of our pull handles here, but tighten that down to really milk that sheath up, and then just give it another pull. And now you can see that Mark 1 is completely gone, which is how you know your iSplice is done. I'm going to take this piece off. And then I'm going to actually take this, undo this knot. That's why an alpine butterfly might be a better way to go. It doesn't get as tight. Taking the eye, hooking that on there, and just making sure you work this back the other way and that there's all the slack is out of the system. So that is your class 1 double braid iSplice. You do have to put a whip lock on there. We may be showing you that in this video or next video. If this ends currently, then thanks for watching. I'm Van with Hang Free, and come back next time. If it didn't end, then well, you're gonna see the next clip. So yeah, there's double braid class 1 iSplice. So as I'm sure you can tell by the length of the video did not end. We are gonna show you how to whip lock, but before I forget to do that, I'm going to measure out the eye. Again, I used 12 inches to start with, and I now have a 5-inch eye here. So it basically is taking away 2 inches from whatever you measure out the eye to be. If you want a 6-inch eye, you'd use 14 inches. And I started with a 10-foot piece of rope. So I lost, or before I say how much I lost, I basically now have 8 feet and 9 inches. So I have 8 feet, 8 inches. So meaning I lost about 13 inches in total length due to the berry. But now we're going to show you how to whip lock. All you're going to need is a little bit of whipping twine. This is Marlowe's number 4 in black. A needle, large needle, like a hand sewing or whipping needle. Has a little bit bigger of an eye on both ends and a very sharp point, and a pair of pliers. I am using a board that's just kind of protect the table as I'm going to push down with the rope so the needle can pass through. You're going to want to take about 40 inches of your whipping twine, which I've already pre-cut out. I like to lay the eye to my right. It doesn't matter really what direction it lays. It's just how I've always done it. And you want to fold that eye, or you're going to want to make an eye by just folding it in half. You don't need a ton of excess here. Just fold it over. One thing to note, the higher you go or the closer to the actual iSplice, the tighter this is going to be, the harder it will be to get that needle through. But if you go too low, you'll miss the berry, and this is what is actually going to keep the berry in place. I'm going to go about 3 to 4 inches underneath that iSplice. Again, with the tag ends folded this way, I'll have a little eye right here, and I'm going to start wrapping downwards away from the eye with the whipping twine, making sure not to cross over the same wrap twice, but to have a nice, neat wrap as I go downwards. Trying to make sure the video can see it here. And you're going to want to do just as many wraps as the rope width is. So if it's 8 millimeters, you're going to want that just about 8 millimeters wide. Again, making sure it's tight. I'll then take this long end going through that loop that's still here. And I'll go ahead and pull all that through. And then this is the end you're going to want to pull to actually get that first initial whip kind of done. You're going to want to pull it to where that knot goes into the middle of those wraps. Kind of hard to see on camera, I'm sure, but you can kind of pull it both ways and finesse it into the middle. From there, you can take the end that's closest to the eye and you can snip that free. You want to get as close to the rope as possible. Snipping that free. Throw that away. Now, take this long end and you want to thread on your needle. Thread the needle through. You're going to want to use as small of a needle as you can. It'll just depend. What I'm going to do here, I may not have cut out enough, but I'm going to pull the needle into the middle of what is left here and have a little bit of excess on this end, meaning a little bit more here than what I want to start with. So there you go, you can see that. Now this is the part where you want to take your time and aim. I want to take this needle and I want to go right back in, right next to where this piece is coming out. And I'll use the board now to kind of help push this needle through. You want to be as centered as possible, going through the center of the rope, pushing it through. If you miss, it's not a big deal. You're just going to pull that out, as I did not go through the center super well, and you can kind of re-aim. I'm not going to go more that way. There we go. I'll take the pliers, pull that through, and I want to pull it to where there's just a little bit of excess on the top. You can find which one it is, and right there will do. So at this point, you're going to make a counterclockwise cross at about roughly about 90 degrees around the top, and you want to go in at top now, coming out on the other side. So again, aim, try to go through the middle of the rope, and you're trying to miss the twine. You don't want to hit that, as you may break the twine. I'm going to need to re-aim. And again, just take your time on this part.
Right up. What's that?
That'll do. Pulling that through. It's called the thumb trick, where you want to take your thumb, make sure those are on the right side. You can press down right there, pulling that through, and make sure it doesn't cross. Gives it a nice finished look, as so. Now you're going to come from the top, going about 90 degrees counterclockwise again, and you're going to go right in, right past where that piece is sticking out, right there. And your goal is to pop out right next to your initial like, I guess, splice or push with the needle. You want to come out right next to it. It's perfect. Pulling that through. Do the old thumb trick one more time. Holding those apart, pulling it down and in. Now you're going to go to a clockwise turn, and you're going to go up next to the needle thread you just did. And again, your goal is to pop out next to the one on the top. Now aim, here we go. It's right next to it. You're gonna pull that through before pulling it tight. Again, thumb trick, pull that down, find the side that's loose, there we go, pull that in. You're gonna do that one more time at a clockwise back to kind of where you started, only this time you wanna aim up the rope. So you wanna go in right here, but you wanna go towards your tag end or away from the eye splice. You're gonna go up the rope. I'm gonna middle that a little bit more. Up the rope, pulling that through, thumb trick one last time. And then what you're gonna do is take your thread. If you use like 45 inches, this will be a little bit easier. I am running out of twine. You wanna pull this back and aim for the same hole you just popped out of. Once again, aiming up that rope. And what that will do, once I pull this through, you'll see this bit here disappear. And right there is where it is, but if you pull that tight, it'll just basically disappear on you. You're gonna do that one more time. You can always do it 2 more times if you have enough thread. I do not. I barely have enough to do one more. See if I can't get a little bit more out of there. Again, pulling that back, aiming for right next to that thread, and then up your rope. So you want to do that one more time, pull that through, and that'll just basically make sure your whip lock never backs out. If you have enough, you can always go one more. It never hurts. I'm going to take that, trim it as close as you can to the rope. Do the same there, and that is how you whip finish your double braid class 1 eye splice. Again, you can throw a piece of heat shrink over top of that to protect it, but that is what's going to hold your berry in place and never let it back out. That whip finish will last you longer than the rope itself will. You just throw a piece of heat shrink over it, it'll protect it from any abrasion on the tree. But that is how you do a double braid class 1 eye splice and a whip finish. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let us know what you think in the comments. Yes, I absolutely did struggle a little bit with doing this. It's hard to do for the cameras and hold it in a certain position and such, but hope you guys got a good idea of how to do it. Again, do your own research and learn how to do everything yourself. But I am Van with Hang Free. Hope you guys enjoy, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.